So just to give a quick overview, we're going to share a little bit about LEVER. Many of you are probably familiar with LEVER at this point, and a little bit about the Evaluation Incubator. We'd love to give you more of a sense of what goes into this application process and have a chance to hear your questions. We're also going to hear a little bit from a past incubator partner who went through this process and is now working on implementing a randomized evaluation. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have some time for questions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Louise, who's the manager of our State and Local Innovation Initiative, to get us started.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of motivation behind LEVER. This project is in recognition that decision makers have a historic opportunity to invest an influx of federal funds in both evidence-based programs and rigorous evaluation of innovative approaches because of legislation like the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and other federal funding sources, which are routing billions of dollars to state and local governments to rebuild in the after effects of COVID-19. So LEVER is a collaboration between Results for America and JPAL North America to prepare state and local governments to rigorously evaluate their own programs and to use existing evidence in developing programs and policies. So over the next 2 years, we will be providing, this is sort of an overview of the offerings that we have. So the first are our workshops and training sprint. To kind of train up jurisdictions on evidence and evaluation capacity. This includes one-time virtual events, the first of which wrapped up in May, and a longer multi-week training that we are launching in the fall. Our evaluation incubator, of course, the focus of what we're talking about today, this has sort of the most in-depth support for government agencies to turn ideas into well-designed randomized evaluations of social programs. We're offering virtual convenings for researchers and government leaders to connect and to share ideas about evaluation opportunities. And lastly, our office hours, which have one-on-one support to answer questions related to evidence use, evaluation, and LEVER program offerings. So if you're interested in connecting with staff from JPAL North America and Results for America one-on-one, please do sign up for office hours, and we're happy to help folks with that if helpful. And today, of course, our focus is on evaluation incubators. First, we wanted to give a little bit of background about JPAL North America for those of you who may be unfamiliar. We are a research center based in the Department of Economics at MIT, and our mission is to reduce poverty by ensuring policy is informed by scientific evidence. We do this through a number of activities that aim to translate research into action, and I'll highlight them here. So we have our research, where we fund and implement randomized evaluations to evaluate social programs. Our policy outreach work, which aims to ensure research and evidence is translated into policy and practice. And lastly, our capacity building work, where we lead evaluation trainings to build the capacity of nonprofit and government leaders to utilize and generate evidence. JPAL has a global network of affiliated researchers that work in many different disciplines. Our researchers are located in universities all around the world, some of which you can see on the screen here. And through the State and Local Innovation Initiative, we have partnered with organizations and state and local governments from across 19 states, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C., and we've worked on over 50 evaluation designs since 2016. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about what is a randomized evaluation. So this is a type of impact evaluation that JPAL focuses on. So in a randomized evaluation, study participants are randomly assigned either to an intervention group where they receive the intervention or to a comparison group that does not receive the intervention. So the key advantage is that because of the random assignment at the start, the intervention and comparison groups do not differ systematically at the outset. So that means that on average, observable characteristics like age or gender should be roughly equivalent across the groups, but also that unobservable characteristics like, say, intrinsic motivation to sign up for the program in the first place, or having availability to a network of resources that would allow somebody to sign up for a program, should be evenly distributed across the groups. So with that kind of in mind, that means that any difference in outcomes that researchers measure between the groups can be attributed to the intervention, rather than to some unobservable characteristics that we might not know about. So in other words, RCTs can help you understand what specific changes to participants' lives can be attributed to a program, which is vital to ensuring that limited resources are well spent on programs that are actually making a difference. So this approach may not always be feasible, and one of the goals of the incubator is to work with your organization to determine if an RCT is a good fit for your context. So the goal of the incubator, again, is to help agencies turn policy relevant research questions into well-designed randomized evaluations. So this slide shows the main supports that partners receive. This includes connections with JPAL's network of academic researchers, flexible project development funding up to $50,000. So common uses for this would be things like staff time during the process, 4 months of technical support from JPAL North America staff to support on things like developing a theory of change around the program that you're interested in evaluating and the potential impact on participants, kind of shepherding data sharing agreements, identifying potential data sources, and thinking through potential opportunities for random assignment. So I'll talk through the timeline quickly here. Our application is open currently and due at the end of next month. After you submit your application, we will invite jurisdictions to participate in an interview to kind of follow up, ask additional questions about your application. We'll then make project selection decisions. And then a couple other, I think, yeah, we're one slide ahead. So a couple other, and then the technical assistance will start in September and run through December. A couple other dates to keep in mind for those who are interested in participating. In the middle of September, we will have a training on randomized evaluation. And in October, we will have a virtual matchmaking convening with participants and researchers in our network to connect about potential evaluation opportunities. So this slide highlights some potential outcomes of the evaluation incubator. I'll walk through these quickly. So the first is that we find that the RCT is feasible and we identify a researcher in our network who can lead the work. That's great. And there will be sort of a definitive path forward there. We might, of course, also find that the RCT is not feasible, sort of arrive at that decision together. But if we are, we might identify a researcher in our network who is generally interested in the questions and in the project. And then you're sort of free to continue pursuing that if that feels of interest to everybody involved. And lastly, we might find that the RCT is not feasible or be unable to find a researcher who's able to lead the work, in which case we would hope that we are offering some capacity building activities that could apply to evaluation in other contexts. On eligibility, we are welcoming applications from government agencies with an interest in evaluating policies and programs that are fully or partially supported by federal COVID-19 relief funding. So this could include, but is not limited to, BIL, ARPA, IRA, or any other source of funding related to COVID-19 recovery. So I'll talk about the matchmaking convening in a little more detail that I mentioned earlier. So a key goal here, again, is to connect selected partners with researchers in JPAL North America's network. We're really excited to do that this year through a virtual event where selected partners will meet with a group of researchers in our network who specialize in randomized evaluation. Each partner will have time to share their evaluation ideas to get feedback in real time from both researchers and the cohort of other partner organizations. And then partners will meet in smaller groups with researchers who have subject matter expertise in topics related to your evaluation ideas to discuss potential collaboration in more detail. So if you're planning to apply, please keep in mind that this event will take place in the second week of October, and we will share more specific logistical details with selected incubator partners. So now I'll talk a little bit about our evaluation criteria. So this is included in our application instructions as well, which include more detail, but I'll hit on some kind of high points and examples here. So the first criteria is a promising approach to addressing the question or challenge. So examples of things to think about here is the program that you're planning to evaluate undergoing development or currently being implemented. Just some more background about the program is quite helpful. Who are the key stakeholders involved in funding and implementation, and how might the proposed policy help to alleviate poverty? Sort of do the goals of the evaluation feel aligned with that? The second is a feasible and ethical opportunity for a randomized evaluation. So what are the practical and political concerns around implementation? Are stakeholders generally supportive of the idea of a randomized evaluation? Roughly how many people are eligible for the program? So what could be the potential opportunities for random assignment within the eligible population that can help us get a sense of that? The third is the ability to measure meaningful outcomes and discern impact. So what data sources could potentially be available to measure the outcomes of interest? What is the potential sample size? Again, related to opportunities for random assignment and just trying to help us understand the feasibility of that. The fourth is commitment to using evidence to inform decision-making. It's useful to understand your agency's prior experience, existing policies, perhaps with respect to program evaluation and evidence and how it informs decision-making. And also what the opportunities to do so would be as a result of this evaluation. And lastly, our review board considers potential contribution to the evidence-based. So would a randomized evaluation of this intervention that you've proposed make a significant contribution toward advancing the state of knowledge generally on the topic? And how does the proposed intervention compare to approaches that have previously been studied? Are some of the ways that our review board thinks about that. So yeah, any questions before we move on to the next section about any logistics of the evaluation incubator?
We have a question from the chat actually that I think would be useful to maybe discuss aloud. Someone has asked, can you share more about the role and responsibility of the matched evaluator? Is the government agency or evaluator, or is it the government agency or evaluator who is expected to hold the evaluation?
So we would, the matched researcher would be the principal investigator on the evaluation. So that means that they would make decisions with respect to research design. But of course, this is an evaluation of a program or a policy that the agency is interested in conducting the project on. So depending on kind of the design that you arrive upon, there, would, I think in almost all instances, absolutely be a role for agency staff to play within the evaluation. But the expectation would not be that you're sort of leading the work and making decisions on it.
I have a quick question. So I had to step in a little bit late, so I may have missed it. But with this, is it only RCTs, or are there like as good as random methods that we might consider for some of like an RDD, regression discontinuity design, or something else?
So for the purposes of the evaluation incubator, we are interested only in randomized evaluations, not to sort of diminish the value in general of other approaches to evaluation, but that is our focus here.
I think now we can move into our chance to hear from a previous incubator partner and the researchers who are working with them, and then we'll have a time again at the end for questions as well. So today we're going to hear from Bob Horton, Deputy Director of the Western Fire Chiefs Association, former Fire Chief of Jackson County Fire District 3. Bob originally applied to a 2021 evaluation incubator with their team's evaluation idea. And after Fire District 3 was selected as an incubator partner, he and JPAL staff worked together to think about the feasibility of a randomized evaluation within their context. And it was determined that this would be a feasible idea. And during that time, we had connected Bob with our researchers in our network who are here with us today, Judson Boomhauer and Patrick Bayless, who are in the JPAL network, and they worked together to plan for a pilot study. And Judd and Patrick submitted a proposal to one of JPAL's researcher-facing requests for proposals for funding to run a pilot randomized evaluation actually just this past January. So right now they're in the middle of implementing this evaluation, and we're very grateful for their time to come and share about their partnership in this project. And we're going to ask them some questions, but to start off, actually, Judd, Patrick, and Bob, I've introduced you a little bit, but I'd love to pass it over to you for you to introduce yourselves as well. Bob, can we start with you?
Of course, Mara. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm grateful everybody that's here. I noticed someone's from Las Vegas, Nevada, and that I am originally from Las Vegas, Nevada before I moved to Oregon 6 years ago. So good on you, and good luck if you're submitting a project. I am at the time that I applied for the program, I was the fire chief, Jackson County Fire District 3. We were situated in an extreme wildfire risk area of the state. We're near about 45 minutes from the California border. To give you a little geographical context, I'll talk a little bit more about the inspiration for it here in a little bit, I think, right, Mara? You'll frame me up to talk some about the project. I guess I'll leave it at that. I was the fire chief at the time. I'm not anymore. Now I work as the executive director of the Western Fire Chiefs Association, but trying to tackle some of these complex policy issues at a higher level. So the work we're doing is not only going to contribute to the local community, the state of Oregon, but really anybody who's in a wildfire risk area.
Judd, can we hear from you next?
Sure. Also very happy to be here. Thanks for including me. So I'm Judd Boomhauer. I'm an assistant professor in the economics department at UC San Diego. So Patrick and I are sort of the academic counterparts to Bob's implementation and on the ground expertise. So we learn a lot. We basically learn everything from Bob, and we get to be the fun academic side of the exercise.
And Patrick, we'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, similarly, I'm an assistant professor at the University of British Columbia and studied the economics of natural disasters and hazards and how people respond to them. So this kind of intervention and evaluation is really like a central area of interest. And when it was kind of brought to us as an opportunity, I think both Judd and I were really, really excited to move forward and to work with Bob and the rest of the team.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here with us today. Before we get started, Bob, can you tell us a little bit more about this project? And Emma, we can go to the next slide here.
So, the impetus for this, first of all, thank you for everyone too on the team and staff and JPAL for even making this available for local communities. I've been trained at least in cursory understanding of program evaluation. I understand the importance of it and trying to inform decision making, but unfortunately, as a practitioner, particularly as a chief executive, we don't always prioritize and or make the time for good, solid evaluation on the types of programs and investments we were making. And so when I got wind of the JPAL project, it was just a great opportunity. I understood how valuable being selected could be for helping inform our decision making, and I knew we didn't have the resources available to us to be able to do this. The impetus for our project, as I teased in, we live in an extreme wildfire hazard zone, and in the fall of September of 2020, Oregon had seen its worst wildfire season in history, particularly Jackson County, where I lived and where I worked. We saw a fire that passed through and burned down 2,500 homes just south of the city of Medford. It was a trying time for our community. For me as the Fire Defense Board chief for the county, it looked like a war zone to me. I was convinced this fire would not stop until it burned everything down. And fortunately for us, we saw a major change in weather pattern and the fire did stop consuming buildings. But the destruction and devastation was just absolutely heart-wrenching. More, mostly to this, of these homes, a majority, probably 80% of these structures that had burned had impacted our socially marginalized and vulnerable populations. I looked at these folks in their eyes as they've lost everything that they had in their life. We're likely to relocate outside our community and we're probably never going to come back. That risk doesn't change. We are still at extreme risk for wildfire, despite the part area that burned. There's areas that have not burned. And as the fire chief, I wanted to do everything we could possible to help protect our community against future wildfires. And this project gave us an opportunity to help navigate that. We know that there are mitigative actions that folks should take at their parcel level. Folks who own homes who are at risk of wildfire, there are actions they could take at their property level to help lower their risk. Some of that is home hardening, using construction materials, not having a wood fence up against your house. Some of these things that are intuitive, and what's called defensible space, which is the removal of hazardous vegetation from in and around your face, trimming your trees back from the roof line, making sure you don't have woody debris in or near your house. Sometimes a wildfire, it's not intuitive how wildfire moves. Sometimes you could see it move like a wave, like you would expect a wave of fire that consumes a community. Many other times, wind will blow embers off the top of a wildfire and launch that ember you've seen this on campfires if you've been around them, it'll launch an ember a mile down the road, drop it in somebody's wood pile right near their house and catch a new fire, or start a new fire and catch those homes on fire. So the fire service has been investing in public education campaigns for decades. Print some flyers, tell people you're at risk, take these actions, it's in your best interest. And yet we're still really seeing a lot of risky behavior at the household level. The state of Oregon itself invested about $2 million a year in just these public education campaigns, had really no evidence on how effective they were. On the heels of this 2020 wildfire, the Oregon legislature passed a bill. It was really a comprehensive omnibus wildfire bill to help protect the community. Important to note out of that was $18 million that were allocated in a community risk reduction fund, specifically targeting socially vulnerable populations to reduce their risk to wildfire. So my motivation, on one hand, help my local community, but really across the entire state of Oregon was, could we do a project that would inform the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office on how to optimally invest that $18 million to maximize the results that we get from it? Historically, the State Fire Marshal's office would just confetti spend that money across communities. As long as they spent a little bit in each community, they sort of checked that off as a success, with no evidence to suggest that we've reduced risk or that the investments were successful at all. So the State Fire Marshal's office heard that I was interested in doing this, that we were interested in piloting a project in Jackson County, and asked for their support. Would they be interested in understanding the results of this so they know how to optimally invest these dollars to help reduce risk across the community? And that was we put in the project. And how much more detail, Mara, are you want more detail now, or wait for questions?
I think this is great. We have several questions to ask you and also Patrick and Judd. So
I'll talk all day, and she knows that. So let me pause and then let you move forward with the agenda.
But no, I think this is the first question that we actually have was what led you to apply to JPAL's Evaluation Incubator, and what was the context in which you sort of came up with this question? So I really appreciate you sharing this background and this context, and really the importance of this question for the state of Oregon, even today. So kind of following up with the description you've just given us, Bob, can you share a little bit more about why you felt that your program would be a good fit, specifically for randomized evaluation?
Yeah, well, we knew, we felt like, and this was with the team from JPAL, I felt like we were able to reach out to our community members, that we would be doing a promotion design that was really suitable for randomization. How do we approach our community members and offer them some other means to take mitigative action? So our design wound up being an incentive design. If we offered folks money, would they take self-protective actions around their house? And if we were going to offer them money, how much money would it take to get folks to move? And so we played around with various ideas, and we did a little good brainstorming with Pat and Judd and the team on different designs, different models, different approaches. And we also needed some support from the state fire marshal's office to fund the incentives in and of themselves. So we knew we had money, so we were constrained a little bit by how much money we had to be able to offer out in terms of incentives, and worked backwards from the available funding to say, we felt like this was a really great project for randomization because we could do treatment and control groups and be able to assess the effectiveness of different intervention designs and different incentive amounts.
Yeah, that's great. And can you talk a little bit, you've mentioned this already, but about how being a part of the evaluation incubator, which at the time it was called the innovation competition, helped to launch this study? How did that kind of support help you to go from this idea to where you are today?
Like I said earlier, I knew the importance of program evaluation and how it could be used to inform decision making, but I didn't have the skills myself, nor a team around us that who really had the experience and expertise to think through. You had mentioned during the kickoff about theory of change and really trying to gather what it is you're trying to do with this program implementation. So having the team to help shape my thinking around what is the policy design or the program design that we're looking for, what are interventions, what could be effective, what's the current, the current research in this area telling us, what do we already know versus what do we do not know. I didn't have the capacity in my staff or my team to be able to do that kind of work in-house. It was really instrumental in shaping our thinking around this project by having the team at JPAL to challenge us, to question us, to offer insight, to produce resources. I noticed you put something in the chat already for the group that's here. Those kind of resources were just incredibly valuable in thinking about this problem and what kind of intervention we could get away with here.
Awesome. And I think actually we're going to move off of sharing the screen so we can have a little bit more of a discussion feel. But then in sort of following up to that, Bob, as you were kind of going through that process, what did you find to be the most challenging about embedding evaluation or going through this process with the existing work that the fire district is doing, the existing work you were doing? What was challenging about sort of embedding this into existing program and operations?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about a project, you got to think about other stakeholders who would be engaged or involved in this. And so you're building a collaboration from the get-go. And one of the harder parts of embedding a program like this is having your collaboration understand the value or importance of rigorous evaluation of a randomized control trial on the front end, because it's difficult for practicing executives to sort of pause to gather evidence and figure out what actually works. We have this tendency to come up with an idea, we think this will work, apply it to everybody and move on. And if we see that at least a positive output, then we just assume everything worked the way we wanted it to and moved on. And the challenge is sort of slowing people down to understand the value of randomized evaluations, so we can say with a little bit higher degree of confidence whether the program was effective or not. Otherwise we like I said earlier, the public education spending, there's sort of no evidence. We just reset the line item every year and spend $2 more million. And as long as flyers went out the door, somebody was feeling like that was successful. So building collaboration, because it's going to take a team when you're doing social programs like this. There's going to be teammates that are involved in ensuring that the teammates understand the value of randomized evaluations and why you're doing the project, I think is helpful up front.
Yeah, can you share a little bit more about that actually? What are some other features that you would consider critical for an organization or an agency to have in place prior to engaging in a randomized evaluation, even just as you're reflecting back on your own experience here?
I would think that, understanding what level of engagement you need, what your program is ultimately trying to do. Do you have the right support and or authority to execute on the program and the results that what you learn from that? Do you have the right players who are in the room? Is there a fiscal impact that needs to be considered? The timing of the incubation versus timing of budget cycles or budget years may be something worth considering, or setting evaluations come to mind. Those are feasibility. How feasible is it for you to be able to do this? Can you do randomization in your particular? It wasn't an issue for us, but some projects may run into ethical issues of whether you can offer a program to some folks or not to others. And the team at JPAL walk you through what you could or couldn't do in terms of that feasibility. But Mara, once you said that kind of popped into my mind is ways to prepare your organization ahead of evaluation.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think those are really helpful things to hear, because I think JPAL, our goal is to support along the way, but there are things that are useful to be in place ahead of time that we can't always know about. And Jed and Patrick, we'll pivot to you now. Jed, can you share what was interesting to you and Patrick about this evaluation? And why did you feel like this program was a good fit for randomized evaluation when you were considering working on this project?
Sure. And the first thing I want to just highlight is how much of the initiative and effort and essential inputs for this project are coming from Bob and his colleagues in Jackson County and at the Western Fire Chiefs. And it's been a joy for Patrick and I to be involved. But I think one important point to make for this audience is that there's no shortage of academics that are excited to work on randomized evaluations. And the real limiting factor here is partners on the ground who are committed to implementing evaluations and making policy based on evidence. So I think Bob and his team really deserve a ton of credit for making this happen. And for people that want to do this kind of thing, there are lots of us in academia who are excited to partner. And so what drew us to this project? I mean, that first, having a partner on the ground and Bob, who was excited to make it happen, was just a huge attraction. And so there's that. And then from a research perspective, I don't need to repeat a lot of the things that Bob said about the importance of the wildfire problem. And we know that one of the most important things that we can do to increase resilience to that risk is to get more property owners to invest in what we call these self-protective investments. And there continues to be a little bit of a mystery about the mismatch between how cost-effective these investments appear to be and the low take-up rates that we see. And so there's just like a first-order research and policy question to understand why we don't have more participation and more investment in these things that seem like they're very, very, very beneficial to individual property owners and also very beneficial to neighbors and at the community level. So that just opens up a ton of really rich research and policy questions.
Patrick, over to you now. What strategies have been useful in developing a strong partnership between you and Jed and Jackson County Fire District 3, sort of between the research team and the partner here?
It sounds sort of right, but like regular meetings have been really good just to stay checked in, even when there hasn't been a lot to check in on each week. I think that's just valuable, even when I think we don't feel that we have all that much to discuss. It actually turns out that, you know, every meeting we've had has been productive in a different way, whether it's more, you know, specifically around what's going on in the project that week, but when it's not, about like future plans, expansions, alternative ways to approach what we're doing, and to think about, you know, because we're in the middle of the pilot right now, but how to think about the eventual hopeful future full experiment. So that's, yeah, regular meetings is one. The other, I think, is making sure that all parties kind of goals are being fulfilled. Judd and I have research goals and interests. You know, we have questions that we want to answer that are applicable to this policy, but also to broader questions of behavior and economic policy, both within Oregon, but also outside of Oregon, within wildfires, but also in other related disaster contexts. But we can't let those goals supersede or sort of dominate the design of the pilot or the evaluation, because our partners have important goals like that they're trying to achieve. So not just Bob, who's was the fire chief and is now a Western fire chiefs, but also the current fire chief of Jackson County, who we've been working closely with. You know, he has a set of goals. His bosses have things that are important to them, and so making sure that we're providing value as a project to what every kind of constituent group wants to do. I think it's been important in keeping everyone like on board, engaged, and excited about moving forward with the project.
Awesome, great. One final question for each of you, actually, and then we'll move into our audience Q&A time. So as a final parting word, do you have any other final advice for organizations or government agencies that are interested in evaluating a program and applying to JPAL, one of JPAL North America's evaluation incubators? And Bob, let's start with you.
I would say, you know, a couple things come immediately to mind, and that's, you know, how much time do you have the time to stay engaged? The Pat and Judd really illustrated it well. Random evaluations take time, and do you have the time to stay involved and to stay engaged and to continue to be a good voice for the project, so that your collaborators don't lose interest along the way, I think is key. And what is it that's ultimately the outcome you're looking for in the project, and is it going to drive the necessary change and ensuring you have the right partners to sign on? In our case, we knew, you know, the Oregon State Fire Marshal controlled the budget for community risk reduction, and we're looking for guidance that would help inform them, using science to inform how they spend that money, because otherwise, without science to support their decision making, it may look like they're, you know, choosing to invest in one area of a community at the expense of another, and not being able to defend their decision in other environments. Recognizing that they would have the support of a project like this that's essentially guiding those decisions at their level is important. So that's sort of, you know, the political will to advance policy forward based on the findings of your evaluation, working that through ahead of time, and knowing that it's going to be a little bit probably, and this could, I'm sure this isn't an exclusive fire department thing where we treat everything like it's an emergency, so we're always just moving fast in general, that this is slower. I assume most folks who are in government are moving at high pace, and so the patience to let the project play out and produce the results for analysis is just something that sticks out in my mind too.
I guess I'll jump in next. I'll echo what Bob said about timelines being a little different, and patience. And then the other thing I would say is just focus on having a clear question that's answerable with a random evaluation. And I think don't worry so much about don't be intimidated by the idea of running an experiment or implementing an evaluation, because as I've gotten to see the support that JPAL provides through this process, it's really pretty impressive. And so there's a lot of resources to support the implementation and support the design of the experiment. And so don't be intimidated by that side of things.
Patrick, any final words from you, or that's okay if not as well?
No, that yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that.
Well, thank you so much, each of you. And I'm going to pass it over to Louise now, and we're going to stop recording. And so now is the time for everyone else here to ask any and all questions that you may have. Feel free to ask our panelists questions about their experiences, or one of us at JPAL questions if you have particular ones about the incubator or the process of applying. And I'm going to drop some links in the chat for an email address you can reach out to with further questions and some information for signing up for our office hours as well.